I'm Caroline Hyde. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Tesla's rocky road. We analyze the electric car maker's latest 53,000 car recall. Plus, the reviews are in and Samsung's Galaxy S8 smartphone has hit the market. But will the demand be there? How it stacks up against the competition. And the wrong kind of pattern recognition. Our deep dive into text diversity issues with Ellen Powell and Anita Hill, two women that helped raise the alarm on gender discrimination and harassment. First to our lead, and Tesla is recalling 53,000 Model S and Model X vehicles for faulty electronic parking brakes that may not release properly. The recalled vehicles are manufactured between February and October last year. The automaker said the issues poses no danger, but is being, quote, overly cautious. Tesla reversed gains and fell by as much as 1.7% earlier in the trading. The company is also facing a class action lawsuit for its malfunctioning autopilot. When it rained, it pours. Joining us now, Bloomberg News reporter Dana Hull. Dana, looking at the numbers, 53,000 recall. How does that stack up compared to previous incidents?
Well, this is the second largest recall that Tesla has ever had. They previously had recalled 90,000 vehicles for a seatbelt issue, but I think it's important to stress that this is a voluntary recall. Tesla is saying that it'll take roughly 45 minutes to fix, and they are doing this out of an abundance of caution. This is an automaker that is gearing up to make the Model 3, and they seem to have caught a manufacturing bug that they want to fix quickly before it causes any potential problems.
Yes, talk to us about the look towards the Model 3, because this has really fueled the share price in recent weeks and months, is the hope that this more price edible kind of car can certainly come to the market and a few more people can be purchasing into it, but a lot of focus on whether they can really hit the numbers.
Yeah, well, I think what you saw with the share price today is that the word recall just freaks everybody out. Even though auto recalls happen all the time, and a voluntary one is very different than a mandatory one from the federal government. So this was a voluntary recall that Tesla put out. It notified customers. 53,000 are affected. Most of them are U.S. owners, and I just think that you don't want to see a lot of recalls happening as you're getting ready to manufacture in higher volume. At the same time, in context, this is a fairly minor issue that has not impacted anyone that we know of. This is not Takata. This is not GM ignition switch.
What about, though, also, we mentioned the class action lawsuit, the malfunctioning autopilot. Is that something to be looking out for in terms of its share price effect? That lawsuit was filed yesterday, and I don't think it had a big impact on shares. The issue is that Tesla's autopilot technology is constantly being updated. There's hardware version 1, hardware version 2, and then constant software updates. My understanding is that this is a lawsuit that was filed on behalf of owners who were upset that they didn't get updates fast enough. We'll see where that goes. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't think it had a big impact on the shares, but I'm not quite sure what the resolution will be. And certainly that recall did affect things at 1 p.m. New York time, at 10 a.m. here in the West Coast. Bloomberg News reporter Dana Hull, who covers all things, of course, Tesla for us. Thank you very much indeed. Now, to a company called Gladly, a startup that can help a business in crisis mode, such as Tesla, deliver better customer service and brand management. The San Francisco-based startup raised $36 million today, led by GGV Capital, the venture firm behind Airbnb, Slack and Alibaba. Joining us now is Gladly CEO and partner at Greylock Partners, Joseph Ansanelli. Wonderful to have you here, Joseph. I'm going to segue rather easily from Tesla to you, because I want to know a company that perhaps might be having a few stresses in some sort of ways. Customer services, how would you be providing an easier way, perhaps in this sort of stressful time, for Tesla or a company you work for, be directly talking to its customers?
Well, I think one of the key things, whether it's Tesla or anybody else, when you have a situation like this, the more proactive you can be, the more understanding and empathetic you can be as a company with your customers, people value that. I mean, at the end of the day, people value that you take care of them. So much of customer service is when you have an issue or a problem, and if you can resolve it in a way that makes people feel good. We love the quote of people forget what you tell them, they forget what you did for them, but they never forget how you make them feel. If they make you feel cared for, that's a key thing that we try to encourage people to do. And in the case of Tesla, they're doing this proactively and voluntarily, which we think is a great approach.
And so at Gladly, better customer service comes in by targeting me, perhaps with a complaint or an issue, and whether it's via voice, email, SMS, you're able to ensure that I'm targeted in every which way via Gladly. Talk to us about the money that you're raising, $36 million. What does that do? How does that expand your business?
Yeah, so we're really excited to have Jeff and GGV involved in the company. And Greylock incubated the company about 2 years ago, and NEA led a Series B last summer. And we've been spending our time the past 2 years really honing this product and really trying to change the way people think about customer service. If you look for the past even 100 years, most customer service has been centered around this model of cases and tickets. And we just, I don't know about you, if you've ever had to call a place and they give you a ticket number or a case number, it's not very personal. So we just said, look, what if we could start over and really reinvent customer service and help companies center customer service back around the customer and really make it about that person and that lifetime of the conversations that you have with them, so that you can engender a greater deal of loyalty.
So I'm thinking of the ticketing areas that might have been perhaps processed by an Oracle or a Salesforce, had you have that within your business. Are you frenemies? Are you working alongside them? Are you trying to push them out in this particular area?
I mean, I think that the products that they have are very traditional in the sense that they are case and ticket based. This model of a case or a ticket. And that's the stuff that we say is just the wrong approach. So anything related to their service products, those are typically the things that we're competing with. Now, they have a whole suite of products that we'll integrate with, like their core platforms, their order management products. Those are all great products to integrate with. So it's more of a co-opetition in those areas. But clearly in service, that's the place that we definitely go up against them.
Where are you at the moment? Can you give us a sense of who your clients are? Can you name any by name? Can you tell us which sectors, regions?
Yeah, so we're primarily focused here in North America. I mean, we're an early stage company still. We're about 50 people here in San Francisco. And our focus is on the mid to large enterprise. And we're working with companies in the sort of commerce and retail sector, travel and leisure, so hotels and an airline, actually.
Can you name that airline? Because we know they need some customer service.
It's not the one that you're probably thinking. And we're really building a platform, an enterprise class platform. So not something for the local startups here, but really for places that have hundreds to thousands of customer service agents.
It's interesting that GGV has a lot of background in helping, well, it has backed companies from China and might be helping a lot of its own portfolio companies get into China. Is that an area that you're looking for? What about regional expansion outside of North America?
So I think there's two reasons why GGV was excited. I think their experience in China in terms of how messaging has changed the way consumers in China engage with brands. I mean, it started in China. It's starting to happen here in the U.S. And that's one of the big things that we think a lot about, which is if you think of 21st century consumers, you and I, anyone from 18 to 80, the way we communicate is very different than the way we communicated 5, 10, 20 years ago. And so I think they saw that massive trend happening in China, and they look at a company like Gladly and say, look, you guys are going to take advantage of that opportunity as this hits the rest of the world.
I'm thinking of just the news that we got out of F8. I spoke to David Marcus, Messenger.
Right.
They're obviously looking to give customers direct access to businesses and vice versa. They launch bots in a big way. Is that a competitor, or is that something that you aid businesses with?
Yeah, we engage on Messenger. So David and what the team has done, we love that platform. So we just rolled out support for Messenger, for example. And so our whole thesis is that we want consumers and companies to be able to communicate back and forth with each other in the same way that you and I communicate with our friends. Like when I talk with my wife, I call her, I leave her voicemail, I text her, I use Facebook Messenger, I use this app that we have for our kids' classes and schools that we talk to each other. But the key thing is, in all of those conversations that I have with her, it's always about her on the other side. It's not about any particular channel. So we're trying to enable that sort of very personal, empathetic conversation that can happen between a consumer and a company to happen on any of those channels: voice, email, SMS, Facebook Messenger, Twitter, chat. We don't really care. We really want to make it about the person on the other side.
I'd love it if you could help me remind me how I spoke to my husband on which particular, whether it was an email or whether it was a WhatsApp or what it was. But last question, because I find this sort of business model fascinating, the respect that you are a partner at Greylock at the same time as being a CEO at Gladly. What came first? Were you already a partner? Did you then build the business inside? Is this something that's replicated elsewhere?
Right. So I've been at Greylock for almost 5 years, and we have a history of incubating companies to pretty good success.
AppDynamics comes to mind. Yeah.
AppDynamics was an early investment. Workday was obviously incubated and started by Neil, who now runs the company. Palo Alto Networks was incubated in our office. Sumo Logic, and It's a little unique in the sense that, many of us, we're all entrepreneurs ourselves, and now we're investing partners. And I think that if we see something and we see an opportunity, we're encouraged to go and actually get companies started, because it's hard to get differentiation in venture capital, right? Everyone's money is the same. I mean, a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. And so you try to differentiate based on your domain, your experience, your expertise. But if you can also build some portion of the portfolio which is proprietary and ideas that only we see, it gives us a unique investment opportunity that if the companies turn out to be very successful, we do quite well. So we try to have some amount of that, but not exclusively that, just enough.
We'll be focusing on Gladly's progress. Maybe you'll be snapped up just before an IPO too. We'll see. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful having you here. Gladly CEO and partner at Greylock Partners, Joseph Antonelli, for joining us. Now, the tech community is working as one once again. Facebook, Alphabet, Snap, and more than 100 other tech giants have told a federal court in Virginia that President Trump's latest travel ban should be tossed away. On Tuesday, the president signed another executive order that begins a process to rethink how H-1B visas are awarded. The Trump administration has also promised greater scrutiny for companies that employ foreign workers instead of Americans. These Silicon Valley heavyweights filed a brief in court stressing this new order would cause serious harm to their companies, their employees, and the economy as a whole. Now, coming later in the hour, we discuss the state of diversity in the workplace. Our exclusive with Ellen Powell of Kapor Center and Anita Hill, professor of Brandeis University. This is Bloomberg. FCC Chair Ajit Pai visited Silicon Valley companies this week to address net neutrality. Pai said that he met with executives from Facebook, Cisco, Oracle, Intel, and other companies, but didn't give details on the discussions. Industry watchers expected Pai, a staunch opponent of the current net neutrality rules, to reverse or alter the policy. Meanwhile, Google is planning to make a change to its web browser that could have huge effects on the digital ad industry. According to the Wall Street Journal, the company is planning to add an ad blocker to Chrome and to possibly turn it on by default for all users. And shares of eBay slid nearly 4% in the session, its biggest drop since October. This after reporting sales growth that continued to lag behind the e-commerce industry and showing it didn't narrow the gap with competitor Amazon in its latest earnings results. Now, a reminder that all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are now live streaming on Twitter. Check us out. It's at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays at 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Now, in recent years, a spotlight has been placed on Silicon Valley's lack of diversity. In response, companies from Uber to Google and Apple have been making efforts to become more transparent on their diversity efforts, publishing diversity reports detailing the gender and ethnic breakdowns of their companies and pouring millions into initiatives with the aim of recruiting and retaining more women and minorities. But much of what they've done has only shown incremental results. Now, we sat down for an exclusive with two women who have really epitomized the fight against sexual harassment and gender discrimination in the workplace. Anita Hill, Brandeis University professor of social policy, law and women's studies, as well as Kapor Capital partner Ellen Powell. Now, I started by asking if we have seen significant change in the almost more than 25 years since Anita Hill's historic moment.
Absolutely, they've changed. And I think one indication of it is that 25 years ago, there was not nearly the public reaction that we have today. Today, specifically with the Bill O'Reilly situation, you have 50 corporations that have responded and resisted and pushed back on the idea of adding their names to this kind of behavior. You have a public that is enraged and is responding. Women are protesting, women are telling their own stories. It's a very public and very different conversation. And 25 years ago, we had a president who actually supported Clarence Thomas, and the public went along with it. This time, with the president supporting Bill O'Reilly, the public is just not buying it.
So public sentiment has changed. Do you feel the same? And then in some way, when you in 2012 came up against your previous employer and you took them to court, do you feel things have changed for the positive?
I think people are now believing people when they bring up their stories and their experiences, and I think that's been starting with Anita and everybody who's followed and sharing their own stories. I think people are now recognizing that there's a bigger problem, that there is discrimination and harassment in the workplace, and it happens to anyone, and it's no longer, what did the victim do wrong? It's really, wow, this is a problem that needs to change. So it's a very different reception, I think, than 25 years ago when people were more less educated, I think.
How is technology making a difference? The tech scene in particular has still managing to show slightly better numbers when it comes to females in the workforce, but it's clearly still evidence of sexual discrimination when they are there. And the presence of ethnic minorities, Black and Latinos in particular, seems pathetic in many companies.
It's been a very systemic problem. So it started, decades ago when the earliest companies started becoming successful, and they were started by mostly white men, and those white men then made the money to invest in other white men, and that became, this whole, it's an epidemic of pattern matching. It's the white men who are successful, so that's who I'm going to invest in, and those are the only people who have the opportunity to succeed. So it's something that has happened to women, it's happened to racial and ethnic underrepresented people of color, it's happened to people who are LGBTQ, it's been every group that is not part of that core original founding set of fathers of Silicon Valley have been excluded. So how do you change that whole culture to make sure that everyone is included, not just a few more women or a few more Black employees, but it's making sure that you're getting the best employee for the job and giving them the opportunity to do their best work.
Are there any evidence of best practice that you're coming up against and saying, yes, that's what should be deployed across other companies? Are you holding some startups or bigger technology companies up as in the light to really show the way that things could be done?
I think there are some companies that are really thinking about it in a very helpful way where they're starting to experiment. I don't think there are like 3 things that you should really focus on that will solve all your problems, but I do think that you need to think about inclusivity as all people, not just certain groups. You need to think about it comprehensively across your company, so it's not just hiring more people and hoping they succeed, but it's making sure that they're onboarded, making sure that they have mentors and sponsors, making sure that they are promoted equally, they're giving the same opportunities across the board. And then the third piece is measuring. So these companies that are taking that time and making the effort to see what levels of diversity they have, what the sentiment is of the different groups inside those companies will have the data that will help them succeed. And the question is, are you going to be able to take that data, share it across your teams, and focus on these problems?
And can I just say, though, that for me, one of the clear pieces of information that we should draw from the O'Reilly situation is that it's not just a matter of bringing people in. It really is a matter of changing the culture of an environment to make sure that when you put all of these things in place, that you actually follow through with an idea of increasing and maintaining increased diversity. And that doesn't mean that you just take old rules and old responses to issues and reapply them with the new population. It means that we have to really get at what does it mean specifically for people of color to be heard? What does it mean for women to be heard? One of the things that I love about what's going on in the academy now is that we're also teaching about intersectionality. We have looked too long at these issues as binary issues. Oh, well, we have women on the one hand and then we have people of color on the other. But those are overlapping categories and the experiences are overlapping. And we're learning to kind of tease out what that means. What does it mean when we're talking about a woman who is a person of color? Or even when we're talking about a man who's a person of color versus all of the perhaps white men who are in business. So I don't want us to think just sort of they're men on one hand, women on the other, women, and that all women are the same, or that all men are the same. We have got to start looking at the nuances of how discrimination works in the workplace, and what do we need to do to respond to make sure that we attend to those nuances, specifically for different groups.
You mentioned having your voices heard, and I wanted to understand perhaps the positive and indeed some of the negatives of having been pioneers in this particular area. We are seeing more women able to come forward and make their voices heard, but do you think women are still in some way labelled as those who have spoken out, and is it always a positive or is it still a negative?
I'd say overall it's a negative. You're a troublemaker, you're a person who isn't conforming to the system, and in Silicon Valley, as much as we think of ourselves as innovators, there is a very strong pressure to conform, and you can see that in the response to different events. I think for women who started talking about the problems in tech 5 years ago, it was very difficult for them, and there are so many women who came out, talked about their experiences, and were not believed. And for people to come out and take that big step and be challenged and be tormented on social media, that is a different type of abuse that we hadn't seen before.
That was our exclusive interview with K-Paul Capital partner Ellen Powell and Brandeis University professor Anita Hill, speaking 25 years after her historic testimony in front of an all-male committee in Congress against her former boss, Clarence Thomas, then a Supreme Court nominee. Now coming up, Baidu wants to be behind the wheel of your autonomous vehicle. We'll speak with Baidu president on the company's plans to open source its driverless car technology. Next, this is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. French President Francois Hollande says the attack in Paris today was likely a terrorist event and wants a Defense Council meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. At least one officer was killed. So was the alleged attacker. The assault comes 3 days before the first round of France's presidential election. Officials say the suspect was flagged as an extremist. President Trump is doubling down on his pledge to press Canada for changes to its dairy system. Speaking today at a White House meeting, he called the impact of Canada's protectionist dairy quotas a disgrace. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded in an exclusive interview with Bloomberg. He says Canada is not the problem for U.S. dairy producers and will stick with its system. The EU is calling for an investigation into the deaths of 8 people during Venezuela's anti-government protests. 2 young adults and a National Guard died. The European Commission says everyone involved needs to act within, quote, the rule of law and human rights. French polls show Emmanuel Macron in the lead in the run-up to Sunday's first-round vote. National Front leader Marine Le Pen is second, but polls also show the other 2 leading candidates, François Fillon and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, are still in contention. Fillon canceled a campaign trip after the Paris shootings. Iranian state TV says former hardline president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has been disqualified from running in next month's presidential election. He shocked the country by registering last week. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah, had advised him not to run. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti, and this is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Thursday here in New York. Already 7:30 Friday morning in Sydney. We are joined by Bloomberg's Adam Haig with a look at the markets. Adam, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So it's really looking like a positive start to end the week here across Asia. We're looking at Australian futures ticking up slightly and the Nikkei 225 as well looking up. So we should have a positive start as markets get going here. From an equities perspective, it's been a bit of a tough week, so it will be good to see a little bit of a positivity coming through from that US session to end the week. FX-wise, we're obviously keeping an eye on the yen after that weakness spurred by those Kuroda comments that accommodative policy will keep going. And then in the Aussie, which has also been feeling the pain over the last few days, it's pretty much stabilising around that 75 cents level. Elsewhere, of course, keeping an eye on the euro, which so far has been unaffected by those Paris shootings. I'm Adam Haig for Bloomberg News in Sydney.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde. And the race for fully autonomous vehicles is at full speed, with one Chinese tech titan making a major move. Now, Baidu has announced it will open up its driverless car technology to challenge tech competitors. Chinese internet giant says it will provide referenced designs and a complete software solution for car makers. Joining us now in an exclusive interview, Baidu President Yaqin Zhang. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, sir. And I'm intrigued. You bought a US startup, X-Perception it's called. Visual perception is what you're adding. I really want to understand what part of artificial intelligence you really want to own. It's more than just search here.
Well, if you look at in the last few years, we have developed a real capability in machine learning, for speech recognition, video, computer vision, and also for autonomous driving. And obviously, we continue to acquire technologies in 3D object recognition, a number of companies that we're looking at. And also very excited to open in our autonomous driving platform this week. Make sure we have the partners and the developers to use this open platform to develop applications and services. So if you look at, this is the first time that any company opened the technology and the platform. So we really want to accelerate development and the commercialization of autonomous driving. This is really profound and significant.
Well, commercialization, where do you sit in the commercialization of autonomous driving? Will you end up making your own automobiles? Will you be just working with other car manufacturers? Who then owns the data and reaps the rewards?
That's a great question. Right now we're looking at making sure we have the technology right, have the right partners to solve all the issues to make that commercially available. If you look at here, our platform has a software, hardware, data, and the cloud services. So we will develop and maintain the right type of algorithms, models, and development tools, and also all the high definition mapping for the industry. And you mentioned about the platform, the open platform. We actually borrow the code name Apollo, and this is as significant as the lunar landing many years ago. It really requires a collective wisdom and investment of many people and many companies to benefit the society as a whole. We're very excited about that.
But will car makers in the long term want to see you keeping the data? Will you have to share it with them because the value is in that data?
Well, there will be different kind of data. We have a tremendous capability in data collection, in data analytics, in machine learning. But those data, some of those will be shared. This is the whole industry, and their data from users, the data from the mapping, their POIs, and the data will be shared. Obviously, you have to respect the user's privacy. But data is valuable, technology is valuable, but more importantly, it's to have an open platform that all the industry players can share, can work upon. If you look at it, this is a highly competitive. Yes.
Yeah, highly competitive. Will you beat the likes of Waymo and Uber to producing these sorts of autonomous vehicles?
No, we are the first company to open our technology platform to the industry. And we hope this will speed up the development. We hope others will follow us. If you look at it is highly competitive. A lot of companies are doing similar things. So for us to open this, people actually can build new technologies, innovation, based on the things we have already built. Besides, all the data, all the models, algorithms we are developing are pretty advanced. So the sharing with industry will be a leap forward.
And Dr. Zhang, I want to move just away from automated vehicles as such and into artificial intelligence, the wider part, because this is in a real area that Baidu was pushing. And in particular, here in Silicon Valley, you had Silicon Valley Labs and the loss of Andrew Ng, who, of course, was a key leader behind that particular part of the business. How damaging is that to Baidu, or how much are you still able to remain resolute in your commitment to AI here in the Valley?
I love Andrew, and obviously Andrew made a tremendous contribution to Baidu. We thank him for that, and we wish him the best in his next endeavor. But having said that, Baidu has a lot of talents, technology leaders, business leaders in artificial intelligence. We have a large group of people working on machine learning, for quite a number of years in Beijing and in Silicon Valley. Obviously, we continue to look for talents. That's one of the reasons I'm here. I was actually at Stanford University to give a recruiting talk, and I was very happy to see packed students who showed enthusiasm and a strong interest in working for Baidu, working on machine learning. It is very exciting, and Baidu really bet the company in artificial intelligence. We believe this is the next era, and that's why we're developing a operating system for AI. We have applications to the home. We are making technologies that enable autonomous driving, and move the technology to cloud for business applications. So in the next few years, you will see an array of products and services coming from Baidu. And this is all built on the talent, which is not only in China, but also globally, especially in Silicon Valley here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here with us, Baidu President and Dr. Yaxin Zhang. Thank you so much for your time live from Stanford with us today. And an update on our Bloomberg scoop that's taken Twitter by storm. Remember, yesterday, Juicero will now have responded to our original story and said it will come to customers with the option of returning their juicer for a full refund within the next 30 days, even if they bought it as far back as a year ago when the product launched. This, of course, was coming after Bloomberg reported Wednesday that the packs of pre-cut fruits and vegetables that Juicero's juicer was designed to press don't actually need to be placed in the juicer. They can instead be squeezed by hand. Juicero's CEO, Jeff Dunn, who took over the position in November, posted a response on Medium arguing that, quote, the value of Juicero is more than a glass of cold-pressed juice, much more. Coming up, Verizon shares plunged in trading after it lost 307,000 subscribers in the first quarter, the worst exodus in more than a decade. Can the company bounce back? We'll discuss next. And a feature we'd like to bring to your attention is our interactive TV function. You can find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You'll not only be able to watch us live, but also see previous interviews from our television coverage around the globe and dive into any of the securities our Bloomberg functions we feature. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only, though, I'm afraid. Check it out at TV Go. This is Bloomberg. Now, Verizon is one of the biggest decliners on the Dow today after the nation's largest wireless carrier said it shed 307,000 customers in the first quarter. That's the worst loss in more than a decade. So is a possible deal the only way to shake up the company and break this slump? Bloomberg editor-at-large Corey Johnson joins us with more. It's fascinating timing, of course, because we had just a couple of days ago the scoop from our colleague that perhaps Verizon had been eyeing up some other potential competitors, and now the numbers seem to indicate why they might be looking at this.
So let's talk about the story behind that scoop. So Scott Moritz, our colleague, Bloomberg News in New York, hosted with a bunch of other editors an editorial appearance by the CEO, Lowell McAdams. But unlike so many CEOs who come in our doors and have these editorial meetings, he's like, whatever I say is on the record. I'm a straight shooter. And so when he was asked this question, he answered the question and gave us that great scoop. But that's Lowell McAdams for you, where he's really going to tell you what he's thinking, including the expansive realms of his thought, including acquisitions. But he also, of course, knew that this quarter is about to be reported was going to have these kinds of numbers with big losses in subscribers. I'm looking at losses in subscribers and pretty pitiful performance in the terms of their share price, Corey. When we look at a particular chart on, if you type in as a terminal user, #BTV7893, just shows you Verizon lagging there in the white since December 2009. CBS up in turquoise, we're seeing, almost 400 percentage point growth. We're seeing Comcast, Disney all outperform. What have they got wrong at Verizon?
Well, obviously, stock price performance has been a problem. Look,
The competitive environment has changed a lot in the wireless industry, really driven by T-Mobile, where this unlimited data plan has proven so successful with consumers. Verizon is operating under the model of let's own a lot of spectrum, let's be available everywhere. Can you hear me now? They thought that that was the answer to a lot of problems, and it was at a certain time in the wireless industry. But the maturity of the wireless industry right now suggests that there's other things bringing consumers, and that's why you saw these numbers. I mean, the losses of 307,000 customers in 1 quarter's time was substantial for these guys. Now it's less than 1%, heck, it's less than 0.5% of all of their users. Nonetheless, quite disconcerting.
I'm sort of fascinated by all the routes that the telecoms operators are taking, because many have gone for content, and you've seen that push. Many also thought Vodafone would be making eyes at this sort of area. We've seen in France today, Orange, one of the big players there, saying they're going to be unveiling a bank, and they're going down the fintech sort of route. Is content going to be king? Is that really the tried and tested route for these sorts of wireless providers?
Orange, which sounds so much better when you say it, like everything, has a history of trying some really interesting things. They've been doing that for a long time. But and so we'll see how long they stick with these bank plans. But I think that Verizon has already spent fortunes on content, buying AOL, buying Yahoo, really focused on having a content strategy at play for the days when 5G finally arrives. So 5G might be 5 years out, but they're planning on building a big content business that will not only distribute their own created content, but also advertisements across all platforms, when they see themselves a lot more like a Google in terms of the back end supplying ads and everything, than just a phone carrier and a wireline carrier. If you think of it, the wireless model is still built very much on the business model of wireline, which is to say, lock in subscribers, keep them for as long as you can, and derive those revenues so you've got a free cash flow model to build up the back end while you're distributing dividends to shareholders. This is a very different kind of model of media, but actually has a potential for growth where they don't have that in the wireless business.
What about internationally? Is this an ongoing theme that we're seeing? China Mobile came out with numbers as well today. Where are we seeing this as where telecoms are a good bet, and where are we seeing it as you've got to best in TMT, not really telecoms?
This change in the business model where consumers are wanting to have these plans that are data free or unlimited data is a very recent change, and Verizon has since changed their mind about steadfastly being against that to actually adopting this with customers now. So this might be a temporary change if they're going to go along with the Joneses, but it's really T-Mobile leading the charge here.
We'll see how they continue to disrupt and whether we'll start to see unlimited data packages working their way across more to Europe and other areas of the globe. Corey Johnson, great analysis ever, Bloomberg editor at large, and he's going to be sticking with us for the next segment, because coming up we're talking Samsung putting it out all the stops ahead of the release of the S8. But are consumers showing any interest? And a quick programming note for you. Coming up Friday, Bloomberg Surveillance is live from Washington at the IMF. We'll be joined by a great lineup of guests, including Jason Furman, former Council of Economic Advisors Chairman, and of course Jacob Frenkel, JP Morgan Chase International Chairman. Looking forward to that. 6 a.m. in New York, 11 a.m. in London. This is Bloomberg. Now, the Federal Trade Commission is cracking down on social media influencers. The FTC said it sent more than 90 letters to prominent Instagram users, reminding them to, quote, clearly and conspicuously disclose their relationships to brands. The agency also warned that common disclosure tactics, such as putting a sponsored label near the bottom of a post, are not sufficient. Now, anticipation has been growing for the release of Samsung's Galaxy S8 smartphone ahead of its release this Friday. A company spokesman announced there have been more than 1 million advanced orders for the device in South Korea, setting a new record for Samsung's home market. But will the demand be there in the US? IDC expects growth in global smartphone shipments to continue to slow down this year, rising just 4.2%. Here to discuss just what consumers are thinking about the S8 ahead of its release. We're joined by Ben Bahar, an analyst in creative strategies, and still with us, Bloomberg editor-at-large Corey Johnson. I was reading online that perhaps there's a red hue to the screen that are being seen in Korea by the Samsung Galaxy S8. Is that a concern? I mean, how much are we pitting, Ben, on the Galaxy S8 given the debacle that was the exploding Note 7?
Yeah, I think that that there's obviously a lot riding on it, right? I think, Samsung has, to some degree, a reputation to repair. As we were talking about, we did some research. We collaborated with SurveyMonkey to do this really sort of quick study just to see. And luckily, the Note 7 issues didn't seem to be a barrier. Over 60% of consumers said that was not something that was a deterrent for them to consider the S8 and the Samsung phone. So I think that's really good news. And among existing Samsung owners, it was even higher. It was like 65%. So I don't think that that's perhaps in the mind of a consumer, and particularly a loyal Samsung owner, as big of a deal as people made it out to be. I think the media is being a little bit more cautious, than they were in years past in their reviews, just to make sure, say, hey, this happened, and so I think they don't want to be too glowing, but it really is a good device.
They don't want to say, we love this phone, oh, by the way,
because they said that about the 7.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that they're playing their cards, but the reviews have been really good. I mean, I don't think anybody said it's bad, and people have been raving about the screen because all of a sudden you get all this great new screen, size in a smaller form factor, which I think people will appreciate. So I don't think that the Note issues are as bad as people think, but I also think Samsung needs to now start ramping up their marketing to continue to increase that demand, both against their base and new customers as well.
Have you been a media person cautious to get too excited about the Galaxy S8?
I think I haven't been excited about a device in a lot, ever. Probably ever. Certainly not a Samsung phone. I think it's interesting. Google needs this to work, right? Android needs this to work. But I think that the problems with the Note 7 isn't just among Android users. I mean, I think that it happens at a time when we've seen the replacement cycle, the refresh cycle, lengthening. Yeah. People are replacing phones much more slowly, so that Samsung got a little bit of a pass just because the consumer dynamics are somewhat changed. The people with older Samsung phones might not have been updated as quickly as they might have been in years past, and so they are actually able to get a chance to kind of skip a cycle here, or at least half of a cycle with one of their devices, and they've got a shot here to really maintain their leadership in terms of sales.
And certainly ahead of the game when it comes to the iPhone 8. We were discussing with Mark Gurman, our gadgets guru here, and he was sort of saying what we're expecting from the iPhone 8, and a lot of it's very similar to what we got given in the S8, and indeed by Xiaomi as well, the Chinese manufacturer, which too has come out with curved screens and small bezels.
Yeah, and I think again, as in this research, we sort of looked at what drivers are the things that consumers are mostly interested. We tested things like Bixby and others, and that didn't really test very high, but screen and camera were still the highest purchase drivers. So I think this is signaling an overall design trend that we're going to see. We're going to see the move toward bezel-less designs probably universally across all smartphone OEMs, and that'll start more in the high end, and I think that'll trickle down to the low end. But again, the value is there for consumers who want as big a screen as possible in the smallest form factor, and for that reason, this design trend I think is going to continue.
What do we see, therefore, in terms of how important this is to Samsung's bottom line as well, Corey? What are you looking out for in terms of we've got Korea getting excited about it, they're purchasing a lot. When do we start to know whether this product is actually doing well in the US?
We'll know pretty quickly here, but I also think it's important for so many of the suppliers. You've got companies like Broadcom or integrated device technology companies that are supplying into this, and we're going to see those kind of results actually may come before we even see results from Samsung, because they'll get the pre-order. So we're going to start to see those stocks, which have been down a little bit since the release of this phone. We'll start to get a sense that when we see their reports for the quarter that's underway currently.
And of course, interestingly, the curved screen and the demand for that, well, Samsung seems to lead the way in actually being the supplier for an awful lot of these things. It sort of wins out by everyone copying it.
It's hot.
Yeah, and I think to Corey's point, the supplier points that go in, and I think especially for Qualcomm as well, for somebody where we're seeing tensions start to rise between Apple and Qualcomm, and obviously Qualcomm gets benefit from vendors who sell at very high ASPs, and Samsung is the only one to do that. So it really benefits Qualcomm to have a win here, especially if they start to lose more of Apple's business going forward. But again, I think one of the things that we included in the study was just who's looking to upgrade over the next 3 to 6 months, and what we found was that 36% of consumers who plan to upgrade in the next 6 months were very interested in the S8. So I think that bodes well.
But will they hold out for the iPhone 8?
Well, I think again, most of those people were existing Android customers, not necessarily iPhone customers. iPhone's a very loyal bunch, as are Samsung.
And to that point, I mean, when we know that historically, when people leave Android or leave Samsung or whatever Android phone they're on and go to Apple, they stay with Apple. So the retention rate is very high when it comes to Apple. And as far as it relates to Qualcomm, what I just say about that is that surely Qualcomm wants this phone to be a success. They want every phone to be a success. But Qualcomm's going to win. Qualcomm's in the competitors' phones as well, so they're always going to benefit from whoever wins.
Yeah.
And so what do we expect, therefore, Ben, in terms of going forward? Is it going to all be Samsung S8? Do you think it'll meet its expectations?
Yeah, I think the thing that we watch is just what happens over the first 60 days, right? So as we watch the next month, we'll see. From that benchmark, you can compare that to how did it do with prior years. My expectations is that I do think consumers will really appreciate the design trend that they're changing to. So I think we'll see a bigger bump, but I expect it to perform similar as S lines in previous years.
Great analysis from you both. Thank you very much indeed. Ben Baharin with Creators Strategies, Bloomberg Editor-at-Large Corey Johnson. That's it for now from Bloomberg Technology.